G'day everybody, Matt Ellis with you for the latest edition of the Cricket Library podcast. And today we have a very special treat for you. Joining us on the program is Queensland wicket-keeping legend Chris Hartley.
There's a chance down leg side. I think it was off the face of the bat. It is. Good catch by Hartley. Sangakkara's gone. Always unlucky in a way to go like that down the leg side, but he did get a fair bit of it.
A fine gloveman who represented Queensland with distinction in 100 consecutive Sheffield Shield matches.
To Hartley, who drives gloriously through cover for four, and that's the 50 for Chris Hartley. And what a way to bring it up. A glorious stroke, flowing elegantly through cover.
Today we will hear about his love of the game and how it drove him to be one of the best in the business. A multiple title winner at Queensland, a Big Bash champion at the Brisbane Heat and Sydney Thunder. Today we hear the Chris Hartley story on the Cricket Library podcast. It's a very warm welcome to the Cricket Library podcast. Chris Hartley, thanks so much for joining us.
Good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have someone with the experience that you've had at first class level, playing a magnitude of games for the Queensland Bulls, also having some time in the Big Bash with the Heat and the Thunder. But everyone's journey starts somewhere, and I'd love for you to share with our listeners where your cricketing journey began and where the fire was lit for Chris Hartley.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting one. My family, there was no obvious cricket background, I suppose. Yep. My father was from Victoria and was a good AFL player, so there was certainly sport in the background. My mum was from country Victoria and was also quite sporting. So as a kid growing up, it was all about, getting outside and getting active and trying as many different sports as possible. And in terms of cricket, I remember a photo in one of the albums where I mustn't be much more than 3 or 4 years old, and I'm carrying one of those plastic cricket bats at a park. So obviously somewhere along the way there was a one of those kids presents that I mucked around with. But I think probably where it really kick-started for me was it was just before I was probably about must have been about 6 or 7. I guess it was around about the age where Mum and Dad were probably thinking it could be time for me to go down to a local club. And where I lived in the western suburbs of Brisbane, we didn't have much of a backyard or even a yard at all. And there was sort of about a small strip at the front of our house at the top of a hill that we lived on that had a brick wall. And I basically had enough room to be able to throw a tennis ball against the brick wall and catches as it deflected off, part of the garden or a brick or whatever it might have been that was just sort of, ill placed. So for me, it wasn't so much about, bowling down a pitch or whatever, or facing, brothers or anything in the backyard. It was throwing a cricket ball or a tennis ball against the brick wall. And one of my most vivid childhood memories with regards to cricket was Mum always had a rule, was that if a tennis ball went on the road, obviously I wasn't to just chase it straight onto the road.
Yeah.
And I missed one day and went to chase after it before it went down the hill, which was also pretty good motivation not to miss the ball. But a blue Pajero came around the corner and suddenly came down the street, and so obviously I wasn't able to chase it, but this car sort of kept going and went down the street, and then about probably half an hour later I'd retrieved the ball and was back playing, and the same Pajero came back up the street. And usually the rule was, if there was a car pretty close, I'd just grab the ball and stop. But the Pajero stopped, and the windscreen, or the driver's side window, wound down, as it would in those days. And all of a sudden, I saw the smiling face of the then Australian Test cricket captain, Alan Border.
Oh, the great man.
He's the great, yeah, absolutely. And he's given me the thumbs up, obviously, acknowledging a young kid having a good time playing some cricket. And it turned out that his parents lived at the bottom of our street, and he'd been visiting them. But it was. Mum reckons that I came absolutely flying inside, and I was floating. I was that excited that I'd just seen my, probably one of my biggest heroes as a kid, drive past and give me the big thumbs up. So I know for me that was absolutely where this sort of passion and I guess idea that these heroes that were on TV actually were real people as well. But it was a really strong childhood memory for me.
Oh, absolutely. Alan Border stopping by. That's got to be one you remember forever. Now, we had Tim Ludeman on the show last year, and he mentioned Santa Claus actually inspired his love of wicket keeping when he had a pair of wicket keeping gloves under the Christmas tree. It sounds like you were doing a fair bit of catching back at that young age then. When did you start realising that wicket keeping was going to be for you?
I think it's funny with those early, well, I call it backyard, but those games at home. It actually, it's funny. My old man had bought a car privately, and we found a pair of old driving gloves in the console. So I had these funny old leather gloves that I think they had fur inside them, even they were that old. But they were these brown leather gloves. So they were my first wicket keeping gloves in the backyard. But pretty much from the get go, when I went and joined a local cricket club, my first club was under 10 side, and I remember going down for I think there was a couple of weekends of trials and that sort of stuff, and I just naturally, they said, "Is there any wicket keepers here?" And I put my hand up because I'd sort of been doing it, when I was mucking around at home, and I think it was just I was a very active kid, so I always wanted to be involved, and I figured, you're going to get the ball a lot when you're the wicket keeper, so. It meant that I didn't have to wait around in the field to get my hands on it. And I think from those early days, I was always keen to be behind the stump. So I think in those days with junior cricket, there was a bit of a rotation. So I'd always bowl the last couple of overs, and there was some pretty. It probably wasn't the worst leg spin for an under 10, but certainly wasn't enough there for me to want to pursue that. But I think just the idea of being involved in the game and just the fact that, you were constantly needing to be in the game and be part of it, that really excited me as a kid. Yeah.
And you move into representative pathways with Queensland. Can you tell us a bit about that journey of being the club cricketer to starting to get noticed and then moving into those junior representative teams with Queensland and Australia?
Yeah, well, I probably in the end followed a pretty a bit of a blueprint, I suppose, for representative cricket with junior pathways in Queensland at the time. From sort of under 13 through to under 17, there was state championships, and I was always involved in those. And then I think there was also at the time Queensland Cricket had a Queensland Emerging Players program. So it wasn't so much a representative side as it was a squad that they picked for each of the age groups through under 13s to under 15s. And basically it was a squad that would get together and train on a regular basis. And it was a chance, I suppose, for them to keep an eye on the young talent coming through, but a good opportunity for the more talented youngsters across the state to come together and to, just start to understand what it is to become a more of an elite cricketer. And that particular program was a big thing in Queensland that led to the Queensland under-17 youth side and the Queensland under-19 youth side. And so after I'd been in that Queensland Emerging Players program, I was in the Queensland under-17 side for one season when I was 14 or 15, and then played in the Queensland under-19 side for 3 years as well. So a lot of that youth cricket, I tended to play up a year or two. Obviously, I wasn't the biggest fella, but I was fortunate that for whatever reason I was able to actually play with guys a bit older than me quite often, which I think is a really important thing for stretching young players with talent. I know that's something Greg Chappell always talks about. Certainly, you've got to get the balance right. You don't just throw any old young kids to the Wolves for any old reason, but certainly I was beneficiary of being able to play against players who were a bit older than me, were stronger than me, and that really challenged me as a young wicketkeeper. And I think that was a big reason why my skills developed through that period of time, was because I was involved with those squads for a number of years from that early age.
Yeah,
but, certainly it was a bit of a blueprint, I suppose, for that process of transitioning from a junior club cricketer to a junior representative cricketer.
And just on your experiences playing with older players, I understand you made your first grade debut as a 15-year-old. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I at the same time, obviously, when you're that age, you're playing school cricket and junior club cricket and all that sort of stuff. And in Queensland grade cricket at the time, we had what was called the Lord Tabner's competition, which was basically an under-16 competition, and it was a bit of a pathway to get junior players from a junior club into a senior club.
Yep.
So I joined the University of Queensland Cricket Club and their Lord Tabner's side, and was playing in that side from sort of under 13s or 14s onwards. And yeah, I just remember. I think we had it's a pretty successful club, the University of Queensland, a very successful club, and I remembered. I'd been doing pretty well in all my youth cricket, but getting an opportunity to play a one-day game as a 15-year-old. And interestingly, we actually had Wade Seckham, who was obviously the Queensland wicketkeeper at the time, and the keeper that I would eventually take over from. He was at the University of Queensland Cricket Club, along with Martin Love and Michael Kaskowitz and a few other players who played in and around the Queensland side, Scott O'Leary and Steve Farrell. So it was very strong. Jeff Foley, I think, was also in there. So it was a really strong group. And we actually, the game I played, those guys all were playing. So it wasn't a case of just sort of filling in because the guys were away. I happened to be given an opportunity despite the fact that the state players were there. So again, as I said, in reflection, there was opportunities that I was afforded to stretch myself. So I was fortunate along the way that the various people who were keeping an eye on me were good enough to give me that opportunity to play, with those guys. Because I think, looking back on my career, the best way to learn is to be with and against the best players in the game and learn from that experience. And I remember I didn't. I think I batted quite low in the order. I think I might have come in at 10 or 11, and wasn't in there for very long. I didn't get out, but I was in there long enough for the opposition to absolutely let me know what men's cricket was all about. It was good fun, and as I said, it was a real learning experience to understand what for the cliche, playing with the big boys was all about.
Yeah, and you eventually do get to play with the big boys 03-04. You get the call up to make your Shield debut against South Australia. Can you tell us how you found out you were going to be playing for Queensland?
So I'd been, by that stage, I'd been through the Cricket Academy and after that particular season and playing for the Australian under-19 side, I got a contract with Queensland. And I'd been on in the Queensland side on a contract for a couple of seasons, and doing my time behind Wade Seckham, and I think must have been there was an Australia A game. I think it might have been possibly down in Hobart, and Martin Love and Wade Seckham, and obviously the Bulls were a very strong side at that time, and quite a few players were involved, and that led to the opportunity, and I don't quite recall exactly the phone call or whatever, but what I do always remember, and I still keep to this day, was the first time I walked into the dressing room, having been selected to play the game. There was a handwritten note in my particular area, and Wade himself had just written a little note, from one keeper to another, even though obviously I was, just filling in for his particular spot at that time. He was, he was gracious enough and good enough to leave a little note to me just to wish me luck. And I think that was obviously says a hell of a lot about him as a guy, but also the sort of the group that Queensland had. It was very team focused, and so that was I think having something like that, when you come into a side for the first time, really, you already feel part of the squad, but the actual playing 11 is something again. And to have those little things and have guys do those sorts of little things for you as a youngster really helps you to feel comfortable and part of it.
Yeah.
We had a couple of legends. In Matt Hayden was in my first game, Andrew Simons, and I remember taking my first catch, obviously, and just the way the boys got around you and celebrated with you as if you're part of the furniture, even though you're obviously only been there for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It's those little touches that I think great leadership and great players make the young guys feel part of it. And I always remembered that, so that was something that stuck with me. And I made sure when I was a more senior player that anytime guys came into the side, we tried to make them feel as if they've been there forever and that they absolutely deserved their spot.
Yeah, and the game itself, I think Queensland win by an innings and a fair bit in this one. You get 100, Ashley Nuffy gets 100, and Andrew Simons gets 100. And your 100, you mentioned Matty Hayden there. You're the first person since Matty Hayden to score 100 on debut for Queensland. Can you recall the emotions around that, bringing up that milestone?
Yeah, one of the things, that is on the side of any young player is there's an element of being fearless. You're going into a situation, so obviously there's an unknown factor, and there's two ways you can kind of take that challenge on. Is that unknown factor can sort of create fear, and actually you get tense and possibly don't perform how you want to, or you can almost see it as as having freedom, because there's no handbrake, or there's no sort of history that potentially holds you back. So I remember sort of going into that game and just thinking, well, it's not like I'm suddenly, the number one keeper. I knew that, more than likely it didn't really matter how well I performed, that Wade was going to be coming back in the side. So for me, it was just to go out there and, I guess, try and play with as much freedom as I could. And as most players know, the days where you do well with the battle ball, they're the days that you're not thinking too much, you're not trying too hard, you just go out and play and have that freedom. And certainly for me, it was that way. I mean, I'm sure there were nerves that there is with any young players when they make their debut, but you try and channel them, in the right way.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting few days because I think we bowled first, and I think that was probably a good thing to get straight into it and get out and get out there and catch some balls and just get into the game. Despite the fact that I was probably pretty nervous behind the stumps just as much as I would have been when I was batting, but it sort of passed by pretty quick. All of a sudden, we were batting, and then I was batting, and then I was scoring some runs, and I do recall probably, you asked about the emotion. I just remembered it being a whole lot of fun.
Yeah.
Always is when you're on the right side of the ledger in terms of a win or loss, and it was obviously a good win for our boys. But it was a pretty awesome way to get into first class cricket and see just how fun it could be.
Yeah, and you get to become a regular in that side eventually, and you get the call up for a tour of Pakistan. Now, tours of Pakistan are not very common at this point in time, and can you reflect on A, what it was like going to Pakistan, and B, what it was like being pretty close to the action in that Australia A setup?
Yeah, that was a really interesting, probably week, I suppose. I got a phone call from the chairman of selectors for Queensland, who said, "Look, you're going to need to fly over to Pakistan for an Australia A. There's 3 one-day matches, and you're going to get fly over because there's been an injury." But it actually came about an hour or two after I just found out at Queensland Cricket that Wade had actually announced his retirement behind closed doors. So it was a pretty interesting sort of day, I suppose, where in some respects I was thinking, geez, I've obviously got to wait till next summer, but next summer it looks like I'm probably going to be, starting behind the stumps, and obviously, getting the opportunity to play over in Pakistan with the Australia A side, which had some incredible players in it. But basically it was a sort of whirlwind. I packed and flew down to, I think it was Melbourne met some Cricket Australia officials at the airport to get bits and pieces of gear. Quickly put that into a bag and was on a plane. And little did I know that the period of time where I was flying to Pakistan, that there'd actually been a bomb had gone off not too far from the hotel where the Australia side was staying. So I arrived at the airport, and I knew that there'd be security. I'd been to the subcontinent before with Australian under-19 side, so I knew that there'd be plenty of security. But I walked off the plane, and I was greeted by. I've never seen more security, in one little spot in my life, and I sort of thought, oh, geez, this seems a lot. The manager at the time, he came as well, and basically I was ushered through. I don't even know that I handed over a passport on the way out. You were basically sort of ushered out the side, and got onto the team bus, and this is all at about 1 or 2 in the morning, as I said, it sort of briefed me on the buses. We're heading to the hotel, but we would have had there was army, there was police, just escorting us back to the hotel, and they'd actually had a phone hookup while I was on the plane back with Cricket Australia and the ACA, I think at the time, and discussed the merits of staying on for that last week, those 3 one-day games, or coming home. So my Australia A tour could have been even shorter. If the decision was made to come home. But in the end, the guys were keen to try and, stay as long as they could and do what they could to keep playing the game. And but yeah, obviously, these days teams aren't travelling over in that region all that much. But it was a great few days. I mean, as I said, it was a bit of a whirlwind because got there straight into it. I remember the heat was just it was unreal. I think it was tougher than India in my opinion.
Wow.
We were playing one days, and the quicks were bowling 2 or 3 overs and having to stop. That was absolutely cooked. So usually, a 50 over stint behind the stumps was a good solid few hours. And I remember, thinking after the first sort of 45 minutes, I thought, geez, I'm feeling the pinch already, just with how consuming the heat was. But it was a good little tour as well. Again, another opportunity to understand what it takes to play at that level, because there was some exceptional cricketers in that A side trying to force their way into the Australian side at the time, and even just having that small window to mix with them, to see how they train, to play with them, was great for a youngster at the start of their career.
Yeah, absolutely. And back home, first taste of a Shield final, 05-06, one of the more bizarre, well, not bizarre, but one of the more interesting Sheffield Shield finals in terms of the sheer weight of runs that Queensland scored. Now, I wanted to clear something up here. This is the game, for those who don't remember, Queensland made 6 for 900 declared, and there was just runs flowing aplenty. But I've heard a story that the reason that Queensland declared in this game was because the CEO of Queensland Cricket pointed out to Jimmy Marr that there could be a problem if the score got to 1,000. Do you know much behind that?
I have heard that story. I can't really say whether it's 100% true or not. I mean, in theory, it probably makes sense. I did know the government scoreboard, and upon reflection, it probably wouldn't have been able to say 1,000. So it wouldn't have surprised me if that came up. I mean, especially when you're sitting on the sidelines watching your batsmen plunder runs, there's a fair bit of joviality, I suppose. So I'm sure those types of things probably popped up. But that was quite incredible. I know that a lot of people, there was some commentary around the idea that it was payback because a couple of seasons prior to that, the Victorians had done a similar thing to us down at the MCG, where I think they might have made sort of 600 or 700.
Yeah.
And had beaten us down there, and that this was some sort of payback. And look, who knows? Maybe there was an element of that for some of the more senior players. I know for me, it was just a thrill to be there. But as anyone who knows, Test cricket and Shield cricket, it's about outlasting your opposition, and that's not just in terms of sustained execution and skills, but it's also physically. And in the end, I mean, 900 was obviously always going to be too many, but a lot of that was about actually keeping their team out in the hard sun on a road and really driving it into them and really trying to, I guess, break their spirit. anyone who's played the game knows how hard it is to bat. That you realise you're out of the game and you've just got to try and find a way to survive it, and you're exhausted. And you only need that small lapse in concentration to make the mistake. And when the more tired they were, and the more ground down they were, the easier it would be for us. So that was certainly a big part of it. But I always look back on it and think, I think I jokingly sort of said that there was 4 guys who made hundreds, and I think I finished 3 not out. So I made one 300th of our total. But I used to joke that maybe there was a 500 that went begging, but probably not so much. I was lucky enough to get a few catches behind the stumps and obviously be part of that. My first Shield winning side.
Yeah, Shield finals mean a lot, and I'll play a bit of audio a bit later when we talk about the other Shield final that you won. Just what it meant to Ryan Harris to win a Sheffield Shield. 100 consecutive Shield games. That's incredible. You just talked about endurance there in that Shield final. Do you pay much attention to the numbers? I know players sort of say they don't look at the numbers, and it's kind of something you reflect on after the fact. What did it mean to you to have the endurance to back up for 100 consecutive Sheffield Shield games?
Yeah, I think all cricketers do keep an eye on the numbers, and probably more so than you need to. I think that's one of the things that as you get wiser, you realise that performances, the numbers will take care of themselves if you're just out there playing the game. But that was one particular, I suppose, statistic that brought to my attention. I had no idea about that particular statistic, and a journalist contacted me through the media manager and asked to do a story and said, look, you're playing 100th game in a row. And I have to admit that, as I said, it wasn't something that was on my radar, but once I sort of thought about it, it was actually one that I took quite a lot of pride in. I mean, any wicketkeeper, takes a lot of pride in their fitness and then their preparation and making sure that, they can go the distance. It's part of the role of the keeper is to be able to do that for the side and to lead the performance in the field and do that. And so fitness is a huge part of that. And obviously to be able to keep your performance at a high enough level to maintain selection and those sort of things. But as I said, wasn't something on my radar. But when I found out, I was pretty chuffed with that one because it's, I guess, reflective of all the hard work you put in. But the great Wally Grout, who said never give a sucker an even break with the wicket keepers, and that's the thing. You never know with how it's going to pan out. So whether you got 1 game, 10 games, or 100 games, you've got to make the most of it. And those types of things, I certainly was always aware of just how lucky I was to be able to play the game as long as I did.
Yeah, and 500 catches, that milestone, there was a fair bit of talk around that one. Darren Berry, prolific wicketkeeper in domestic Australian cricket, one of the best we've seen domestically. To get that 500th catch, I think it was George Bailey down the leg side, actually. Talk us through what something like that means. It's another number, I know, but a pretty big one.
Oh, definitely, and that was one that obviously would have been more on the radar. I think, once you start to get to those sort of higher numbers, you realise that you're up at that sort of upper echelon in terms of, those dismissals tallies. And Chuck Berry was one of the best behind the stumps, and I was lucky I got to play against him in a couple of my early games in that particular Shield final at the MCG I mentioned. That was a good one, and he didn't miss me, but it was a really good it was a really good thing though, because I remember I had the 100 on debut. Then my next game I played against New South Wales and got a duck, and then in the first innings of that Shield final, so it was my third game, I got another duck. So I was coming out, in the second innings, we were getting stumped, and I was looking down the barrel of 3 ducks in a row and a pair in the final. And they were obviously coming hard from all directions, but I remember Chucky going pretty good, and it was really a good test for me. I hung around and got a few runs at the end, but got a great chance to talk to him after the game as well. And that's what I think was great was, you played the game so hard out there, and as if everything depended on it, but off the field, he was good enough to come up and talk keeping and all that stuff. And I maintained a relationship with him over my period of time because, wicket keepers, not everyone gets a chance to go behind the stump. So it's an art that not everyone understands. So as a little, I guess, fraternity, we sort of keep close quarters. And, any time you get a chance to talk to people who have done it to that level is a great opportunity. But, look, it's similar, I suppose, to probably what he would say is that, it's reflective, I suppose, of your talent and your performance and your ability to maintain that over a long period of time. But I'm sure, probably similar to him, it was always the catches that you missed that probably you remembered more than the ones that you actually took.
Yeah.
So, hopefully it was more often taking the catch than not.
Yeah, for sure. And now 2009, you're over playing, I think it was for Chorley Cricket Club over there. You're playing during the 2009 Ashes, and Haddon gets an injury. Manu comes into the team. Then Manu gets injured. Talk us through how close you were to possibly making your way into that Australian team in 2009.
Yeah, I'd made the decision that I wanted to get back over to England and play a bit more cricket in the winter and work on a few things. And I hadn't actually, when I actually had made contact with the club over there, that was quite a bit before I sort of realised that there was an Ashes series. So I was always going to be going over, but I had a pretty good summer before that, and I thought I might have been a chance to sneak into the CA contract list and see how we go. In the end, obviously, Graham Manu went, and he was a very good player as well. And so I guess that part of me was a little bit, I thought, hey, I'm starting to get close. I'm starting to get some consistent performances on the board for Queensland. This might be an opportunity, but it didn't happen. So obviously I went over to England, and my real focus there was I wanted to basically work on a few things with my batting, but put myself in a situation, I suppose, where, I had to take a lot of responsibility as the club pros have to when they go over to England. And, you're always expected to score runs. And I wanted to try and challenge my batting before I came back to Queensland, where I was, needed more responsibility rather than just being someone who sort of chipped in with the bat. And so that was why I was over there. And, it was, I was having a great summer and enjoying it. And, I'd actually been to a couple of the tests as well with a few of the other boys who were playing in different leagues. So it was a really, really good English summer. And I actually was on a bit of a road trip with a fellow Queensland Bull, Ryan Broad.
And Winner Manly,
and we just and we just started our road trip. He was playing somewhere up north near Manchester as well. We'd driven down to London and then headed across to Wales, and we'd actually had a pretty good first night out. And I woke up the next morning and had about 5 missed calls on my phone from a number I didn't know. And at that time, no one was ringing me for any reason. So I rang it back, and it was Steve Bernard who said, mate, we've had a couple of injuries and we've got a tour match here. We know you're over here. Would you able to come and play? And you're certainly not going to say no, but I had to work out the logistics in my head because I was in Wales, and I thought, I've got to somehow, well, number one, I've got to wake up my roommate here, tell him that road trip's abandoned, and then I've got to drive from Wales up to Steve had actually said, what time we're over in Canterbury, what time can you get to the hotel? I said, look, to be honest, I've got a couple of things to do today. Is it okay if I get there in the evening? And he said, yeah, that's fine. It's a few days out before the game, so no dramas. Just give us a buzz when you get in. I said, yeah, no worries. And so that was when I thought, okay, well the clock's now ticking. So yeah, wake up, Broady, who would probably have preferred to stay in bed. I said, look, mate, we've actually got to drive back up north about, 6 or 8 hours, whatever it was, back up to Manchester, pick up all my gear, and then I was going to get in my car and head back down and drive all the way back down again. So I sort of fair chunk of England in the one day there. Well, certainly their road system anyway. But so got to the team hotel and met the rest of the guys and had a couple of days training with the squad before the tour match itself. But yeah, I think in terms of your question of how close he got, it was quite fortuitous, really, that those events played out the way they did. And Brad hadn't obviously damaged a finger, but it wasn't anything too bad. He obviously bad enough that he missed that particular test. But it was certainly never going to be something that dragged on for too long. So it's probably an interesting little example, I suppose, of with wicketkeepers. You're never actually that far away, but you also, you might not actually be as close as you think either. It's an interesting one for the keepers, as they say. You can be the fifth best batsman at a club and you're still playing first grade, but you can be the fifth best keeper and you're playing down the grade. So it's just a lot of the wicketkeeper. That's the role that it is.
Yeah, and you come back to Australia, you have some success with Queensland. The game in particular that stands out for me is that 2011-12 Shield final. You guys are in a bit of trouble in that game, and you helped get Queensland out of trouble. I'm just going to play a bit of audio here from Ryan Harris. This is just some of his reflections on that Shield final and how much it meant to him, and then I'll ask you your reflections on it as well.
This one was just amazing, and I had tears in my eyes at the end of it, because it was just something. Like I said, it was like getting the bag of green. It was just a dream come true to be able to hold that beautiful trophy, the Shield, to hold it and say that I'd won it, and won it with Buff coaching. Another sort of tale in my cricketing career and life with him, and to win it with such a great bunch of guys, it was amazing. And obviously, as you said, the way we won it with Steve McGoffin batting like he did, and then Chris Hartley was just phenomenal. So
phenomenal. Talk us through it. Got the boys out of trouble and made runs in the biggest game of the season.
Yeah, it's funny. I'd actually he mentioned Buff there, and I really enjoyed playing under his coaching. And I'd actually been batting really, really well that season, but just not really scoring runs, particularly in the second half of the season. So I was a little bit frustrated because I was either finding ways to get out and everything. I was doing all the right things, but just really not getting, I suppose, the big result that you were wanting. And I remember Buff just pulling me aside one day and said, "Mate, you're doing all the right things. It's going to come eventually, so just keep doing it." And, it's just a quiet word like that allows a player to, I suppose, keep their confidence and keep going. And for me, it did sort of come together in that final. But, we were in a little bit of trouble, obviously, in that first innings on a wicket. A wicket that wasn't too bad, but it was probably the mix with the overhead conditions for the majority of the game. I think that's the thing. Everyone just assumes at the Gabba that, it's a fast bowler's paradise, and certainly there's a bit in it for the quicks in terms of the pace and bounce and occasional a bit of green stuff underfoot. But it's more so when you get the overhead conditions as well that it can get really tricky. And so that was a low scoring final, but a really exciting one. And I think the quality of the cricket was just fantastic. That's my best memory from it. I mean, I said before that it's always better when you come out on the right side of it. But I just remembered how good a game it was. It just swung back and forth so many times. And I know for me personally, batting in that particular situation, it was a situation I sort of got a lot in my career, and I really enjoyed it when we had your backs to the wall and had to kind of come up with something for the team. I think I usually found a bit, for whatever reason, in those scenarios. And in some respects, I found a way to play with a bit more freedom in the mind, because you almost, it sounds funny to say it, but you almost sort of think, well, the batsmen haven't done their job per se. So whatever I can sort of muster up here through the middle order and with the tail, it's going to be a bit of a bonus. And our biggest I guess goal in that first inning was just trying to bridge the gap with the Tassie first innings total, because that's the key. You don't want to knock yourself out of the game in that early stage. So as I said, it was just a great game because it just seesawed back and forth. And a lot of the time in cricket, those low-scoring games can be the ones that are really enjoyable, both to play and to watch. But there was a lot of really good performances in that game. Alistair McDermott took some wickets
Yeah.
for us. James Hopes was excellent with the ball and scored a really crucial half century as well in that first innings. And it was a really, really good game of cricket. But I think I enjoyed that one for different reasons to the first one. Obviously, because this one I was a more senior player and had more responsibility to contribute, performance-wise, which I was able to. So, as Ryan said, it's a pretty rare thing to be able to win a Shield. I know Victoria in recent years have been, they've been lucky enough to be able to get their hands on it quite a few times, but many players can go through a career without getting the chance to hold the Sheffield Shield, and anytime you do it, it's very special.
Yeah, absolutely. We had Jamie Siddons on recently, and he lifted the Shield twice in a 16-year career, and that's probably, as you say, that's two more than a lot of people lift the Shield. So moving into Big Bash, exciting time in Australian cricket, and you're playing when it's all kind of evolving, starting out at the Brisbane Heat and then later at the Sydney Thunder. Can you tell us about your BBL experience and maybe compare the two titles? You win BBL 02 at the Heat and BBL 05 at the Thunder. Your reflections on those?
Yeah, I mean, BBL for me, I'd be the first to say that, T20 cricket wasn't necessarily my strongest format where I was able to contribute as much. But what I really enjoyed about the format was where I was able to bring my leadership and what you're seeing on the field and the tactics and strategy, and being able to contribute that way. Obviously, you're still contributing with the bat and the gloves, but I really enjoyed, I guess, the requirement to, in some respects, you've got so much less time to kind of work through a decision or work through a strategy. So it's really quite snappy with your decision making, and that's a really fun thing to do. And I suppose comparing the two sides that I played with in terms of winning the Big Bash, our Brisbane Heat side, we certainly, we had a very up and down campaign that, we only just snuck into the finals. Most of it was on the back of Luke Commersback, who was having a very good season for us and scoring a lot of runs. And it was very typical of a Queensland-based or a Brisbane-based side, is that sort of almost underdog thing, back to the wall and finding a way to win games and that sort of style, I guess, of play. Yeah. And we managed to do that. And, even right down to the final over in Perth, WA is a very difficult place to go and play. They've got a pretty hostile crowd, and, at the time they had a very good side as well. And we were able to go over there and again, managed to scrap our way to a win. And I was lucky in that final. Unfortunately, our skipper, James Hopes, had injured himself in the semi. So I took over the captaincy in that semi-final and then in the final, and really, as I said, really enjoyed the challenge of being out there under the pressure of, obviously must-win games, but also, the lack of the time that you've got to make decisions. You've got to be really sharp and be really clear on what you're trying to do. So that was a lot of fun. And, contrasting that with the Sydney Thunder, by that stage I sort of was wanting something just to sort of freshen up my cricket. And while I probably never imagined myself playing anywhere outside of the state of Queensland, that's one of the great things that T20 cricket and Big Bash has done, is players are able to move around a lot more and, broaden their experience, both playing-wise, but also with the people that they're around. I know for me, what I really loved was going to another group that seemed so different from where I was, but then you get in amongst it and you learn, this is the way they do things. Yep, we do that in Queensland, but hey, they do these things differently as well. So really learning about the similarities and the differences. But that particular campaign was really fun because the Sydney Thunder squad that we had for the couple of years I was there was a really it was put together very strategically by obviously superstar Mike Hussey, but the general manager at the time, Nick Cummins, as well. They were and the coach Paddy Upton, very strategic about the players that they I guess almost handpicked. I know from my particular personal spot, Mike had sort of said to me, look, we one of the things we want, he said, I'm not worried. We're not bringing you here to score any runs. We know you'll do the job behind the stumps, but we want someone who knows how to win games, who knows how to play in pressure situations and win in situations where it seems like it's unwinnable. And they it was almost like each player or each position, they sort of had a bit of a criteria for what they wanted to bring to the group, and they sort of, put a group together. And ultimately in that BBL 06, we were able to, go all the way. And again, had some very good standout individual performances. That was the season Trey Ruff sort of made his name, I guess, in the Big Bash. And when you've got guys like Mike Husky and Jacques Callis in the side, there's plenty of talent there. But that was great fun too, as I said, particularly to go and experience, a different way of doing things. At that point in time in my career, it was a really enjoyable thing to freshen up the mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And transitioning out of cricket, how's that been for you? Spending so much of your time and energy to become a professional cricketer. How are things tracking now, and how's that transition been out of cricket into the next stage of life?
Yeah, it was quite interesting. Players talk about it for different reasons. I certainly think the transition was difficult. For me, it was the reasons, I suppose, were different to what I expected. I was lucky we had our first child just after I'd retired. So I was lucky in that regard that I had something to put all my focus and energy into straight away. But what I probably found challenging was not so much, missing the game as such, because I think part of the reason I retired was because I felt like that I'd sort of expended everything I had. But it was probably just some of the other things that cricket brought that I didn't realise, was such a big part of who I was. So, the competition that cricket brings, the elements of the camaraderie, being part of, I guess, of a group everywhere, everyone's moving in the same direction, little things like that you don't always have in the groups, that you work with outside of professional sport. Some places do, but it was challenging for different reasons. I probably, as I said, it wasn't some of the things that most guys sort of talk about, but I think that's the challenge of transitioning. Is it's unique for everyone, and you've got to go into it open-minded and expecting there to be at least something that makes it a little bit challenging. But ultimately, you speak to most people and they find a path, and ultimately I'd like to get back to the game of cricket. Right now I'm working in marketing and communications in the retail industry, but I've certainly got the passion for sport is huge, and certainly for cricket. So I wanted to get away for a little bit, just to taste a different industry, taste a different environment. But certainly the passion's there to one day get back to sport and get back to cricket.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think once you've got cricket in the blood, it seems to be the case for lots of the people we talk to on the podcast. It's just stays ingrained, and cricket will always be there somewhere for the diehards, I suppose. And now we wrap things up with a question that's very popular with our listeners, and love to know your response to this. If you could pick a dream net session with three people, they don't have to be cricketers, they can be from any walk of life, they could be celebrities, they could be other athletes, whoever you like, living or dead. Who would you love to have at your dream net session?
That's a really good question. I think given how big a cricket nuffy I am and I probably would stay in the cricket or sporting realm.
Okay.
As much as you could pick any number of celebrities, but I'd probably, I wouldn't spend too much time worrying about the cricket. So if we're actually having a net session, I've probably got to go with, stick with the cricket.
Yeah, I love it.
I reckon first one, the one that popped up for me was I'd want the king there. I'd want Shane Warne there.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to play against him a couple of times. And he was just amazing to face, from a batting perspective. I'd love to get him to come in and have a bowl. And I wouldn't bother batting. I'd get him behind the stumps and have a keep to him. Because it's obviously something I didn't get to experience in my career, but I think that'd be pretty amazing to see the way he operates from behind the stumps. I'd love the opportunity to do that. So I'll go with the king for one. I reckon I was always really interested in I guess, batting and the mechanics and the mindset and just everything that goes into it. And, probably to the detriment at times in my career and probably overthought things at times, but always really interested in that side of it. So I reckon for the other two, I'd probably go with someone who's obviously a master of batting. So I reckon I'm going to go with Ricky Ponting.
Yeah.
Obviously, arguably the best since Bradman that we've had and an absolute genius. So I'd go with him because I'd love to pick his brains. I did get a chance to talk to him a little bit about cricket on that 09 Ashes weekend that I was there, but also at various times throughout my career, and always loved listening to his insights. It's similar with his commentary, and I think to get a chance to talk batting properly with him would be pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And I'll go a little bit left field on my last one. But in a similar vein, I'd go with probably maybe some sort of Major League Baseballer, maybe like a Derek Jeter or something.
Okay.
For similar reasons, maybe just to try and understand their mindset and the way they operate about seeing the ball out of a hand with a pitch. See if there's what the similarities are, what the differences are. Obviously, slightly different game, but a few similarities as well. So maybe interesting to see if there was anything that they do or any techniques, any mindsets, things like that could possibly, be paralleled into the game of cricket. Perhaps that might be interesting as well.
Yeah, well, Derek, if you're listening, I'm not sure if you do tune into the Cricket Library podcast, but get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. That'd be outstanding. Well,
that would be pretty cool.
It would be very cool. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you, Chris. I really appreciate you taking the time to share some of your insights with our listeners and just open up the window into the world of what it's like playing at the elite level for such a long period of time. And we wish you all the best with the future and hope to one day again see you back around in cricket circles giving back to the game.
Absolutely. Thanks for the time. And it's always nice to chat and reflect upon it. But, like anyone, if you're a cricket nuffy, you love listening to the podcast and hearing everyone's stories and sharing them. So thanks for giving me the chance to share mine.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks so much, Chris.
Thanks, Matt.
A massive thanks to Chris Hartley for joining me on the Cricket Library podcast. So good chatting to a fellow cricket nuffy, and not just a cricket nuffy who had elite level skills and executed those skills to precision for the Queensland Bulls, the Sydney Thunder, the Brisbane Heat. An excellent first-class domestic career and one of the best glovemen we have seen in the modern era. And fantastic to hear his insights on the game and what it was like to be a part of it all throughout his distinguished time in all of those places that we just mentioned. And some great net session selections. Warnie, he's a popular fit. So Warnie, you are going to be a busy man if we ever get these net sessions off the ground. Punter will be probably equally as busy. But Derek Jeter, what a great left field shout that one is. Major League Baseball and getting those insights in that net session there. Derek, at Cricket Library is our Twitter handle. Get in touch. We'd love to see you at the nets, and we'd love to see you, our listeners, back for the next edition of the show. We've got Will Somerville coming up, and that is a very worthwhile listen. A magnificent story, the Will Somerville story, and we'll get to hear it around this time next week on the Cricket Library podcast. But it's time for me to bid you all farewell. Before I go, I need to remind you to subscribe. I need to remind you to like and to share and to do all the things on your social networks that'll get the word out there about the Cricket Library podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate each and every one of you. This has been Matt Ellis for the Cricket Library podcast. Bye for now.